Hi, my name is Thomas Maurer, and it's an honor to present at this year's MVP Days. In this session, I'm going to talk about Azure Hybrid and how you can connect your Azure Stack HCI or your Azure Stack Hub and so on with Azure Hybrid services to make your on-prem environment even better. My name is Thomas Maurer. I'm a cloud advocate working at Microsoft, and our main jobs are basically creating content, delivering content, engaging with our communities, gathering feedback, what is working for our customers, what is not working, and bring that feedback back to our engineering teams. So happy if you want to reach out to me, please do. You have my URL, you have my Twitter handle. So hopefully if you have any questions, feel free to interact with me during that. So we're gonna jump right in here, and we're actually gonna have a look at how we're gonna, or why hybrid is such a big thing and why it is so important. So if we look at our customers' environment currently, you can see that they're getting increasingly complex, right? So IT operations, IT administrators, they are managing hundreds, if not thousands of applications. And some of them very modern applications built on PaaS, serverless, containerized solutions, but some of them very traditional workloads in virtual machines or even physical servers, running on-prem on Azure Stack HCI, on our competitors, and in other environments as well. And that brings me to the next point. This highly diverse infrastructure. This gets also more and more complex for IT staff to basically maintain this and administrate that infrastructure, right? So companies have probably their own data center locations, they have stores, they have branch offices, they have different OEMs, they have even IoT devices maybe which need to be managed by IT. And then we have customers obviously deciding, hey, we're going to do multi-cloud. Some of them maybe they choose Azure as their main cloud provider, but they already have another cloud provider in their environment, a department which already started and they're using another one. Or they decide, hey, for this specific scenario, we're going to use that cloud provider because they have a better service, or they are basically like we want to have some sort of flexibility when it comes to cloud provider. So managing all that becomes a lot of effort, and that's we're trying to help, and I'm going to show you how you can actually use Azure services to make your on-prem environment even better. Now, to go hybrid, again, there are many reasons. We obviously had talked a lot about this. There can be regulatory requirements which make sure that some data needs to stay in your country or in your data center, and you can't really bring it into an Azure data center because, for example, you don't have an Azure region in your country. And then we also have like challenges when it comes to networking and latency, right? You want to run services where there is no internet connectivity or no connection to an Azure region, or the application can just not deal with that much latency. And then we also see customers saying, hey, okay, we are not quite ready yet for the cloud, but we want to use the cloud technologies and modernize our applications, our environment, using our own data centers and doing that in our premises under our terms. And so those are all valid points to go hybrid, right? And again, there are probably way more than this, but those are some of the reasons why we see people going hybrid. And then if people decide to go hybrid, there are different approaches to this, right? So one of the hybrid approaches is to, for example, connect existing services you have to Azure Hybrid services. So think about like your virtualization environment, your Windows server, your Linux servers running in your data center, in your branch offices, or even again at other cloud providers. And you can basically go up and connect them to Azure services, right? So you can make sure, hey, everything which is already there, I can basically use that and make it better by using Azure services. The other part is that you might want to deploy something new or new application based on Azure services. But again, you can't move it to Azure. Again, could be regulations, could be network requirements. So you want to have these Azure services in your data centers. And that's what we can do with things like Azure Stack Hub or Azure Arc to bring Azure services to basically anywhere, wherever you need them, right? So this is also very important for Microsoft. If you watched last year's Ignite keynote, directly after Satya was Jason Sanders, which is the engineering lead for all the Azure services. He presented in his keynote and he talked about hybrid, and he clearly said that we believe that hybrid is an end state for our customers. So it's not going to be an in-between state until everyone is migrated to the cloud. We really acknowledge that there is a need basically to run services at the edge, in your data center, in your on-premises, but again, also in other cloud providers. And that is where we now go with our direction to basically say, hey, we need to help our customers, especially in hybrid environments. So therefore, we offer a couple of different solutions. Again, we have, for example, with Azure Arc, where we bring Azure services to any infrastructure. So for example, today you can run Azure data services on any infrastructure. It doesn't matter if it's on-prem or at another cloud provider. If you are in the private preview, you can basically go out and run Azure SQL on your infrastructure you want to. And then obviously we have our Azure Stack portfolio, which you heard a lot about, where we have Azure Stack HCI as our hyper-converged solution, or Azure Stack Hub, which can bring that consistent way of Azure and your own instance of Azure Resource Manager to your location, to your on-prem environment. And then we also count in there all the IoT things we are doing. This can be done by all the IoT offerings we have in Azure, but also, for example, with using Azure Stack Edge and other solutions there. So let's get a little bit more technical and let's go into some of our presentations. So one thing I want to highlight here is I'm going to use a lot of Windows Admin Center in my presentations. And if you haven't used Windows Admin Center yet, then you should definitely have a look at it. It's a free download. It's a web-based management portal, which basically you can download and install in your premises. It doesn't need any Azure connection at all if you don't want to. And you can basically go out and manage your Windows servers, as well as your Azure Stack HCI clusters, as well as your other Hyper-V clusters, if you will. And it basically gives you a web-based UI for things like certificate management, event log, and for all these local-only tools, right? We even have a great solution now for Performance Monitor, where you get a new web UI with some couple of new features, but still uses the performance counter you all know and use to track your performance. Now, the great thing about Windows Admin Center is that it's basically you don't need to install it on every server. You can install it on one of your systems and then start remote managing your systems. And it uses PowerShell remoting to do that in the background. And again, great solution to manage all of that, but I'm going to use it for one specific point. I'm going to use it to connect Azure Hybrid services. So it's super easy using Windows Admin Center to connect these Azure Hybrid services and then take that advantage of that. Now, that said, everything I'm going to show you, you can also set up without using Windows Admin Center, right? I'm going to show you a couple of different demos and you can use basically everything you want in that. So where does hybrid services come into play? So one of the things where we can benefit from Azure Hybrid Services in a very good way is basically when it comes to disaster recovery and backup. And I'm going to talk a little bit about disaster recovery, and I'm going to show you a quick demo for disaster recovery connected to your hybrid environment. Now, if you look at what our customers are facing, we have a couple of different challenges today with disaster recovery, right? Usually we have some distance requirements we need to get our head around. We have initial replication challenges if we have a very bad internet connectivity. But then the main thing I feel like are cost and complexity, right? So we have a lot of customers paying a huge amount to different vendors for the licenses for disaster recovery. And another challenge is, again, it can be very complex to set up, right? If you have just 2 data centers, it's probably easier. But even then, you need to figure out, okay, where do I replicate what? Do I need to have the same hardware? Do I have all the same flexibility? And so disaster recovery never really has been easy. So we're going to have a look at that, how we can use it. So I'm going to use a company, a fake company, if you will, which we all know and love, called Tailwind Traders. Basically the company in Microsoft which represents everyone and no one at the same time. And the question here really is, how does Tailwind Traders solve their challenges with their current disaster recovery strategy using Azure Site Recovery? And so I'm going to show you a quick demo for Azure Site Recovery. I'm going to show you how we're going to use that on a single standalone Hyper-V server. But again, this can also be a Azure Stack HCI cluster or any Hyper-V cluster. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So here I am in Windows Admin Center. And you can see here it's a web-based UI. It's locally installed on one of my management machines. And you can see on the left side I have the tools or extensions as we call them, which is basically the menu to go through. And then in the middle you can see some information about that server. And you can see here I'm connected to a Hyper-V server. And if I go down and scroll down, we have a solution called virtual machines. So if I click on virtual machines, you can see here I get like some information, how many virtual machines I'm running. I get an inventory to see all the virtual machines on that specific server. So if I click on it, I can basically go out and set disaster recovery. So I can go and click on protect VM. And this will get me into a wizard, which allows me to restart the replication for that VM to Azure. So you can see it already selected the subscription location and the Azure Site Recovery Vault. However, I can also go out and say, hey, I can change, for example, the storage account if I want to use another one or use an existing one. And then I would click on protect and it would start with the initial replication. However, we don't want to wait for that, so I already prepared app 01 here and replicated that VM to Azure. So you can see here it's protected, and if I click on that link, it takes me to the Azure portal directly to that item. So you can see here my VM app 01, it's healthy, it's protected, so I have a good status on that, and if I click on it, I can get some more information on it. So now you can see here again, you get some information about this virtual machine. It's healthy, it's protected. You can also see that the last replication happened 5 seconds ago. And I have a couple of other steps I need to fulfill because when I want to failover. So Azure Site Recovery is very smart. It takes the name of the VM. Will also be used for the Azure VM. I obviously need to enter a resource group. It also detects which VM size I should use. So it matches the VM size with an Azure VM size. And then obviously I also need to configure which virtual network in case of a failover I want to use. Now, if I want to failover that VM, I can either use planned failover, or test failover. Again, test failover helps me to test the DR. I don't want to find out that something is not working when I actually need to failover. I can use test failover to run some tests. I can do a failover if I need to. So let's say our Hyper-V server or our data center is down. I can just log into the Azure portal and click on failover, and the VM will failover and start up in Azure. And then we have the last one is just planned failover. That is basically when I know I need to do data center maintenance. I need to shut it down, but I still want to keep the VMs running. In that case, the on-prem VM will shut down. We will have the last replication going on and start up the VM in Azure so we don't have any data loss. So those are the options you have. Again, this is now the single VM view, but you can also call it something like runbooks. Disaster recovery plans, where you can basically build a plan with multiple virtual machines, with runbooks and automation to make sure that everything works great. So what I just showed you was basically a replication from a standalone Hyper-V server to Azure. But again, this can also be larger environments. You can use System Center or other Hyper-V clusters. You can even replicate VMware virtual machines as well, or physical nodes as well. Now, let's go to the next challenge we are seeing. So one of the next challenges we're seeing a lot is update management. And when it comes to update management, customers have they need to invest a huge amount of time to do all the orchestration of update management. So they have usually physical servers and virtual machines. They run on-prem or in the cloud. It's Windows and it's Linux. And so that's a big set of stuff you need to think of. And then you obviously want to know, hey, are my VMs compliant with my update policy, right? Do they have the updates actually installed? or what's the status here. So I want to have a view about my compliance state. And then I also want to go out and actually install these updates if I need to. And I want to also schedule these updates. So I can basically go out and say, hey, please patch my servers every like second week or something like that. So we're going to quick have a look how that looks like for servers which are running on-prem in our data center or at another cloud provider. So for that, we're again taking our example company, Tailwind Traders, and we're going to have a look how does Tailwind Traders ensure that both servers running in the cloud as well as on-prem have the most recent software's update applied. So for that, I'm going to show you an overview about Azure Update Management. So here I'm in the Azure portal. I'm in an automation account and have the update management solution activated. Now you can see here I already joined a Azure VM, and you can see here it's compliant and it's actually working. And now what I can do here, I can go and add another Azure VM if I want to, but I can also go and say, hey, I want to add a non-Azure VM. And then with that link, I will come to the documentation and will explain me how that works. But if I use Windows Admin Center, I can basically just go and scroll down in Windows Admin Center to the update extensions. And here I can manage the local updates on that machine, right? So I could just go and say, hey, install me the updates on that machine. But however, I want to do that at scale and centralized managed. So I want to join that to Azure Update Management. So for that, I click on Update Now. I log in with my Azure account. I select which subscription I want to join. Again, I use an existing resource group because I want to join them to an existing update management solution. It automatically picks the Azure region. It will tell me which I can select which update log analytics workspace and automation account I can use. And again, this is the automation account I just showed you. And then I click on setup, and this will now automatically go out, download the agent for me, install that agent, and then basically connect it to the right Azure automation and log analytics accounts. So after that is done, we can go back to the Azure portal. And if we do a refresh there, we will now see that my WAC machine here, my server, which is non-Azure VM, just shows up and it says, hey, it's not compliant because there's some update missing. So let's fix that and create a scheduled update deployment. I give that update deployment a name. I call it for now on-prem. I select, if it's Windows or Linux, I can then select the machines. Usually in production, I would use groups to do that. I can also use dynamic groups, depending on, for example, tags. But for now, for the demo, let's just select that single VM here. So I'm going to use that VM. I'm going to add this. And then I can go out and basically select the update classifications I want to be installed. I can go out and include, exclude updates. And then most importantly, I can go and schedule that update deployment. So I can select the time and the date. And then I just click on OK. And I can also do obviously recurring tasks. So I can say, hey, every week on Tuesday, I want to install patches. And then I select if I want to reboot or not. So reboot if required, that sounds like a good option to me. So now we'll take some video editing tricks to basically go a little bit further in time to actually show you how that looks like. So if I go to deployment schedule, you will see my scheduled deployment here. You can see it's ready to run. And after a while, if it has run, you can go to history and you can see here that deployment job completed successfully. It took 10 minutes to complete. And if I click on it, I can get some more information about it. I can see here that I updated one machine and installed 3 updates on that machine. Again, I can use that to update multiple machines at the same time if I want to. So if I go back now to my machines, you can now see that both of my servers here are now compliant. One of them running in Azure, the other one running on-prem in my data center or somewhere in another cloud provider, right? So that is Azure Update Management. So Azure Update Management really checks the compliance of my Windows servers and Linux servers, both on-prem or in Azure or at another cloud provider. It can go out and deploy and install updates. And then we are basically have a single pane of glass which we can actually go out and manage our updates. We don't need a solution with one for Azure, one for on-prem, one for other cloud providers. We can basically just use Azure Update Management for all our servers wherever they are running. A great thing, by the way, to mention, if you're running Azure Stack Hub, there is also a perfect integration with Azure Update Management. There is an extension. You can deploy a virtual machine on Azure Stack Hub, and it automatically joins the Azure Update Management solution in Azure. So whenever a VM is deployed, it can automatically show up there, and you can start managing that in that way. So let's jump to the last option here I want to talk about. And this is, how does Tailwind Traders make sure that servers across Azure, on-premises, and other cloud providers are compliant, configured, and managed in a single pane of glass? So for that, I'm going to show you quickly Azure Arc. And first I'm going to show you the operator side, or the cloud operator, which basically has an overview about all the servers in this environment. Now here I'm in Azure, and you can see here all my Azure resources. Wouldn't it be great if I could see my Azure and my non-Azure machines at one place? So I'm going to select this, and you can see I select my Azure Arc machines. And now you can see here my Azure VMs and my on-prem file servers and my Linux servers running in other cloud providers in the same view. You can see here I can use tags, like for example, like location tags or even cost centers. So let's quickly group them. Group by type. And now you can basically see here I have 4 Arc machines and 2 Azure VMs here. And now I can, for example, go and use tagging as an option to filter. So I use the cost center tag, and let's say, hey, I want to see all the machines for cost center 1001. And now you can see, I can see the Azure machine as well as the on-prem file server, which is in the same cost center. So it gives me a very good option to actually organize my servers. Doesn't matter where they're running. However, there is more, right? So one thing I want to show you is policy. If you're not familiar with Azure Policy, Azure Policy allows us to basically configure the Azure environment and set some rules for certain ways. And then we also have Azure Guest Configuration, which basically allows us to manage settings of the operating systems of virtual machines running inside Azure VMs. Now, for example, here I can do an assignment. I'm going to show you that in a bit. I'm going to select the scope. This can then be a management group or a subscription or even down to a resource group. And then I can basically say, hey, which initiative definition I want to use. That's basically a collection of policies. So I'm going to look for, let's say, passwords. So we have one already built in to audit VMs with insecure password settings. So this can go out and audit your virtual machines as well as your obviously on-prem servers for password settings. So I'm not going to do that because I already set this up. And now, if I go to overview, you can see here I get a little bit of an overview, some nice charts here, what assignments I have and how it looks like in the last 7 days. And then if I want to find more, I can go to compliance, and I can see here I have certain initiatives assigned which are compliant, and then I have certain which are not. So let's click on one which I'm not compliant with. And this one audits VMs that are not set to a specific time zone. So I want to have all my servers in a specific time zone. And now if I go down, I can click on non-compliant resources, and I can now see my Azure systems, my Azure virtual machines, as well as my on-prem servers in a single pane of glass, and basically see, hey, those are not compliant with that specific policy. So that is very handy. Again, get an overview about all my servers wherever they are running. Now that was Azure Arc and Operator View. How do we actually do that? And this is a high-level view of Azure management. And no worries, I'm going to show you a little bit what that means. So if you start on the left side, if we're an Azure customer, we are basically interacting with Azure Resource Manager. So we're using things like the Azure Portal, the Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, the APIs to basically interact with Azure Resource Manager. And the Azure Resource Manager gives us things like subscriptions, log, RBAC, policies, tags, all that good stuff comes from Azure Resource Manager. And until we announced Azure Arc, we basically used Azure Resource Manager to manage Azure resources, right? Makes sense. So what we did with Azure Arc, we basically extended Azure Resource Manager to also do that for non-Azure resources. And today we can do that in public preview for servers. We can do that in private preview for Kubernetes clusters, as well as for data services. And again, it's not just there to replace the local tools in general, but just give you the power of the Azure Resource Manager for servers and systems which are running outside of Azure. So the next question would be, how does Tailwind Traders application administrators manage their servers and make sure that their systems are compliant with? So for that, I'm going to quickly show you a demo. Go back to the Azure portal, and I'm basically going now to Azure Arc. And you can see here, as I mentioned, the free services. So we have managing servers, we have managing Kubernetes clusters or data services. For now, we're going obviously to manage servers. And now you can see here all my on-prem and servers which are running outside of Azure, which are connected using Azure Arc in that place. And if I click on server 2 here, for example, you can see here that it looks like an Azure resource, right? I can basically go and then say, hey, I have activity logs, I have role-based access, I can use tagging and all that good stuff. Now I see, for example, here's a tag missing, so I could go and say, hey, and just use the location tag, and this one runs on my Surface Pro, so I'm going to tag it with my Surface Pro. Obviously, you would use a data center location or something like that in production, but just to show you, you can basically use that as well. And then I have things like policy to basically go out and see all the policies which are assigned now just to that specific server. So again, before I had the view about all my systems everywhere. Now I only see the policies which I'm not compliant and compliant for that specific server. So now I can go and say, hey, audit my VMs for insecure password settings. And you can see that this policy initiative have a certain set of policies. Some of them I'm compliant, some of them I'm not. So let's have a look at one, which I'm not compliant. And now I see I'm not compliant with showing audit results for VMs that allow reuse of the previous 24 passwords. So now I could actually go out and I can read a little bit more about why and what that actually means. I can then go and change that manually, or I can even go and create a remediation task to basically fix that setting directly. However, there is more. I can also use logs to basically have access to log analytics, but just for that specific server. Before I had, for example, a view on all of the systems. When I had access to the log analytics workspace, I would see all the servers which are reporting to that. Now I basically only have access to the logs of that specific server. And so, for example, if I want to run here a query for updates to see what updates are installed and what are pending, I can get the update log here and can get that information which shows up here. So now the other question is, how do I actually onboard a system here? So how do I onboard a server to Azure Arc? I go simply to add server. And then I basically have two options. It can be an interactive script, or I can onboard machines at scale using a service principal name. If I don't want to log in on every single server, and that makes absolutely sense. If I have a couple of servers, I just want to automate that process to join them to Azure Arc. So I'm going to generate a script here, which will then install the agent for me. As you can see, I will select the subscription. I will select the resource group. And I will obviously need to select a region. Today we can select 3 different regions because, again, we're in private preview right now. And then I can select, okay, which operating system I'm going to install that. So for us, let's just say it's Windows. I can also go and configure a proxy. So if the server is behind a proxy, I can also configure that. And then I can go out and say already, hey, I want to add a couple of tags. I can do that later, as you just saw, or I can already do it when I join the server and already say, hey, when I join the server, he should already have that location tag, for example. At the end, I can then just review, can download the script. And basically what it does, it just goes out and installs the MSI. It basically downloads it for me, then installs it, and then basically connects my server to the specific Azure resource. So if you want to learn more, Check out the following links on Microsoft Docs. I have one link to help you with the Windows Admin Center hybrid services, and the other one how you actually onboard Azure Arc servers to Azure. And then if you want to learn more, you go out and check out Microsoft Learn. With that, I want to say thank you. It was a pleasure to present at MVP Days. Thank you. Hopefully see you in the next one.